Stuart was born and grew up in South Africa. He obtained bachelor and master's degrees in social work from BYU University, Brigham University. He has been employed with Family Support and Treatment Center as a therapist since 1998, where he provides clinical services to children and families whose lives have been affected by abuse and trauma. Since 2004, he has served as treatment coordinator and is a registered play therapist supervisor and is TF-CBT trained. And overall, just a very good human being. So.
Oh. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Heather. Can you hear me? If I step away from, can you hear me if I step over here?
Yeah.
Okay. I wish some of you at the back had sat further forward. I feel so lonely up here. Hopefully you had a good lunch and you had a good session before this. We're going to wrap this up. Thanks for being patient and making it through the day. Before we get going, I want you, well, first of all, to have a sense of my audience, how many of you are mental health professionals? Okay, and how many of you are students? And how many are here as people of interest that are here that aren't a student or a mental health professional and are just here to learn? Great, thank you for being here. Wonderful. First thing I'd like you to do, I'm a social worker, I'm touchy-feely, so I don't want you to turn to the person next to you because you probably know them. So turn to the person behind you and I want you to tell them why you are here. So just take a minute or two and do that. Okay. I'm sure many of you are here for many different reasons, and I'm glad you got to meet somebody and share that with them. What I would like to propose and suggest is that regardless of what all those reasons were, that you're here because of a relationship. And relationships are the most important thing, I think, in this work that we do. Now, that relationship might be a relationship with Doppel because you need CEUs for your license. Well, that relationship might be because you had a supervisor that said, go to this conference and come back and tell us about it. Or maybe you came here because this is one time a year where you get to see past classmates. And you arrange to meet somebody here and have lunch with them. Or maybe you're here with coworkers that you have a relationship with. Or you're here because you have a relationship with your clients that you treat around these issues that we're discussing today. And you're here because you have a relationship with humanity and about caring. And about being a first responder, because that's what we are in terms of mental health. My wife is an ER nurse, and so we often joke about how she is the physical first responder, and she's got the physical health, and I'm the emotional first responder and got the emotional health. And hopefully together we do a good job. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for your interest in this subject. I am personally very honored to be speaking to you today, to have been asked to speak to you. I consider this a privilege, and thank you for being here and for giving your time and attention to hear some things that collectively will make us better as we leave here today and go and do this work. And hopefully give us some new understandings and insights or some ideas, or just a thought to maybe reset something within ourselves about the people we work with and how we see them and the work we do. So thank you. I work at the Family Support and Treatment Center in Orem. That's a private nonprofit agency. And there are, some of you may know that agency, there are 13 family support centers throughout the state. And the reason I bring this up is because they have a resource that you all need to know about if you don't know about it. And that resource is a crisis respite nursery. What that is availability for 24 hours, 7 days a week in crisis situations for parents or single mothers to be able to bring their children ages 11 and younger to a safe environment if they are in a bad situation or in a violent relationship and they need a break, or they may need to go file a protective order but they haven't got a babysitter. Maybe they are in therapy themselves because they are a victim of IPV, but they don't have somebody to watch their young children that would prevent them from going to therapy or a group. That is a resource that your clients and such parents can utilize to be able to have their children in a safe place. Some shelters that mothers go to with children, or if it be, they, by my understanding, aren't able to leave their children at the shelter if they are not there. So if a mother has to go for a court date, or she goes to workforce services to apply for a job or do some skills training somewhere, she can't leave her children at the women's shelter if she's not there. We are a resource and an option, short term, usually for a few hours, to be able to provide them relief in that situation. So hopefully those of you that know about that are using it and are telling people about it, and those of you that didn't know, now you know. That there's one more resource. Jennifer Oxburgh talked about the resources that they have. We have additional resources. We provide treatment for victims of trauma for all ages, but the Crisis Respite Nursery is Family Support and Treatment Center's foundational program. And so please be aware of that. Some of these slides will have some contact information on it. I also have some cards if anybody's interested in that. Sometimes people ask about volunteer opportunities. There are those too. So thank you. So let's talk about the effects of IPV on children and appropriate treatment modalities to consider when working with children that have been exposed to IPV. Jennifer that spoke before the lunch break, at least in this theater, Jennifer Oxburgh from UDVC, she briefly, in about 30 seconds or a minute, mentioned the ACE study. And I'd like to go back to that for starters. By raise of hands, how many of you are familiar with the ACE study? Not just heard of it and it's an acronym, but really know what it is? Okay. That's okay, about a quarter of you. And maybe some didn't raise their hands. So the ACE study is a longitudinal study that started in 1995 with Dr. Vincent Felitti and Rob Anda. This was a collaborative study between the Center for Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente healthcare systems in California. Dr. Felitti began doing some research initially with obesity, and in working with his clients, that research project kind of took a turn and turned into the ACE study. It's ongoing. It's over 20 years now, with a sample size of more than 17,000 people initially, and even more so now. And what Dr. Felitti identified was these 10 experiences, traumatic events that potentially could have negative lasting effects on the health and well-being of individuals and children we're talking about today. So we've got them grouped up there on abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. Those are the 10 adverse childhood experiences. Now what Dr. Felitti has found in the research is that there's a direct correlation between number of adverse childhood experiences, coping mechanisms or maladaptive coping mechanisms to deal with those adverse childhood experiences, and then long-term health effects, both physical and mental health effects from that. So in the abuse category, we've got physical, emotional, and sexual. There's neglect, physical and emotional, and then household dysfunction. And we're speaking about IPV today, so a lot of what we talk about with IPV tends to fall in that sector. Not that it can cross into others. Jennifer Oxburgh mentioned that IPV, as far as it relates to the ACE study, is one of the most severe things that a child could experience. Why is that, do you think? What are your thoughts? Participate, raise your hand, speak loud, so everyone can hear. Why would IPV be a childhood experience that maybe carries potentially more impact long-term than any of those others? I know you had a good lunch, but you're awake. Yes?
Well, I don't know if this really affects it more than the others, but it actually affects the wiring of the brain as, as those pathways are developing.
And we will get into that. And maybe affecting it more is maybe I'm using the right word, but potentially why are the impacts greater with IPV than one of those others? Marilee?
Perhaps because they're helpless, the child is helpless and the onlooker, and that trauma can be worse than if they could fight back or try and do something to stop it themselves.
Okay, I'm just interested in your thoughts. Thank you. Maria?
Because IPV, if you look at all these 10 items, if you include IPV, you could potentially have every single one of the household dysfunction items, potentially the emotional neglect, you know, because it encompasses so many of those things.
Okay, so if you could you hear Maria at the back? Okay, IPV encompasses a lot of what's in here. So let's look at it this way. A child that has been sexually abused, they may have one ACE, one adverse childhood experience, and that's what they're dealing with, the impacts and effects of that. Sometimes that can be a standalone event for some children, and they have one ACE. But if we go to IPV, it's very difficult to have a child that has been exposed to IPV or a caregiver treated violently and not have some of those others too. So if we get into IPV, there's a good chance there may be divorce or at least separation of a relationship. Substance abuse may be involved. There may be an incarcerated offender, family member. There may be mental illness, likely some emotional abuse. So a child that's exposed to IPV is probably hitting 4 or 5 of these potentially. That would not be unrealistic. So you may wonder, why does that matter? How does the number of ACE incidents affect the child? Dr. Falidi and Anda have studied 40 to 50 areas. These are just some that I just handpicked for the presentation today. So if you have 0 ACEs, you have a 7% chance of being a current smoker. 1 ACE, that goes up to 8%. And as the ACEs increase, so does the likelihood of employing that coping mechanism or that behavior. We look at alcoholism, depression, severe obesity, illicit drug use, heart disease, suicide attempts, STDs. And like I said, this is just a handful that I pulled from slides of different areas that they've studied. You'll see that from his research, 4 or more ACEs is a real cutting point. It's not uncommon for, if you've all done this mentally in your head, you know, most of you will probably have 1, maybe 2 ACEs. Some will have more. But it's not uncommon to have, 1 or 2. But once we hit that threshold of 4 or more, then things really escalate. And so that's why if we go back to that slide, with IPV, pretty much we're going to be hitting that mark with children. Keep in mind we're talking about children and the effects on them, and then some treatment of the IPV. Okay, yeah. Another way to look at that, if you've got those 4 or more ACEs, again, just some basic things. Twice as likely to be a smoker, 7 times more likely to be an alcoholic, 10 times more likely to have injected street drugs, 12 times more likely to have attempted suicide. Jennifer Oxford talked about IPV being a public health epidemic. I don't discredit that at all. This is a public health epidemic because of the outcome of those events on children. Imagine if we together could eradicate or decrease these ACEs for children, what the long-term benefits would be for our communities, our schools, just our homes, our nation. And I'm not talking, dollar costs. That's a whole nother billions of dollars each year that's spent providing treatment for the effects of these events that so many experience at a very young age. So that's my shout out for prevention. Prevention is really important. this goes into that a bit more in depth. That first column is, again, those 10 adverse childhood experiences. The middle column, if you look through that, you'll see the impact of trauma and the adoption of health risk behaviors to ease the pain of trauma. So a child exposed to IPV will very likely be affected neurologically in these ways and adopt health risk behaviors. Can you see that all at the back? The previous room was lit more light and it was hard to see the white. Can you see the white all the way at the back? Is that clear enough? Okay. So when you look at that, and by the way, if you want to make a note of this, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris has an excellent TED Talk on the ACE study. It's about 17 minutes, and if you really want to go there, I highly recommend you do. Go to TED Talks and search that Nadine Burke. Does Burke have an E on the end? Okay. Burke with an E on the end, I believe, and Harris. Is a wonderful TED Talk. She's a physician, so it's wonderful to hear about a physician talking about these things and how they affect physical health, because she sees it on that end of the spectrum as a physician. Okay, and then, so those are the adoption of health risk behaviors, but the long-term effects of disease and disability and social problems, this is more likely what your physicians are going to see. This is what we see, the social problems. That's what we're dealing with. Homelessness, prostitution. I don't have to read them all if you can see them there. The slides will be available through the school, or through the conference website. But that's quite something. Now, I listened to a conference last week from Dr. Dan Siegel, who does attachment work, and some of you are familiar with him and his work. And he talked about a meeting with Dr. Felitti, saying, that's so depressing. Like, you did this study, and then you put that out there, and you go, hey, here's your life if you have 4 more ACEs. You know, where's the hope? So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to get you living here feeling good, hopefully. My friends often say, why do you do what you do? That's got to be so depressing. How do you go to work every day and do that? And I say, why wouldn't you want to go to work and have a job where you help people heal and you're helping to ease people's suffering and pain? And I think everybody ought to want to do that job, in my opinion. But I'm preaching to the choir because that's why you guys are here. So those are the long-term consequences. The number one physical effect of ACEs is ischemic heart disease. Heart disease is essentially, we could say, a broken heart. I think there's something really to be considered about that. That when these things happen in homes, hearts are broken, in a very literal sense. Okay? I like this slide. This is from Rob Anda, who did the study or is involved with that with Vincent Felitti. How it breaks it down. If we look at, whoopsie, didn't want that. How to make that go away? Oh well. So at the childhood, if we're looking at these adverse childhood experiences, they have a disruption on your development as the child's brain is developing, which then impacts and restricts the ability for social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, or social and emotional engagement, and contributes to cognitive impairment. Then there's the adoption of those health risk behaviors we talked about on the previous slide. And then there's disease, disability, and social problems, and early death. This over here, epigenetic mechanisms, essentially, I'm not a geneticist or have medical training, but this has to do with the genetic impact of ACEs. Epigenetics basically is dealing with the way genetics and DNA is coded and packaged. And ACEs have an impact on that. So it changes the physiological structure. And as that then increases, that can also be transmitted intergenerationally. So it does have a very big picture effect. If we look at some of these things, some of those social problems and these diseases and disabilities, we can see how intergenerational effect plays into those things. I really like this slide. I hope you do too. This is comparing, whoopsie, typical development of a brain to a traumatized brain. But before we talk about that, I want you to have a little experience. And I'm not going to ask you to talk to anybody. You can stay comfortable where you're seated. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to notice your reaction. And then I'm going to say another word, and I want you to notice your reaction. Okay? So I want you to close your eyes, get comfortable. No. 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 Yes. 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 Okay, you can open your eyes. I'm hoping that some of you will be willing to share what that was like for you and what you experienced, what you noticed within yourself. I can't see anybody with that light. What did some of you notice? Kelly?
Well, I think the first time you said no, it made me jump.
Made you jump? Startled you?
After that, I was afraid for it every time. So
Okay.
I was waiting for it. But
So
the yes
just
is
fear and reactionary?
yeah.
But the yes was?
Each one calmed.
Okay.
I wasn't afraid of it.
What else did you experience when you heard the no? Yeah.
Similar to Kelly, I feel like I had a physical reaction of leaning away from you.
Okay.
Backwards.
Physical response of leaning away and wanting to retract? Okay. There was another hand somewhere.
Increased heart rate.
Increased heart rate. Okay, thank you. Tom?
Yeah, at first it was like, oh, there must be something, and I'm just imagining in my mind, I must be doing something that might not be safe.
Okay.
Almost like a parent telling me no. But then when you repeated it, then it became more kind of emotional as far as like critical or yeah. So,
Okay.
And yeah, a little more of yeah, heart tightening.
So for those at the back, Tom said critical, like a parent telling a child no, heart tightening. Heart tightening. Stomach tightening, heart. Yes.
When you said no, I felt more shut down.
Okay.
When you said yes, it felt more open.
Okay. What about when you felt yes? Anybody else want to share what they felt with yes? Yeah.
I felt like I could take deep breaths and relax.
Okay. Deep breaths, being able to relax more. Anybody else? Yeah.
I guess I wasn't very trusting of the yeses. Like,
Ah.
it took a couple.
Okay.
Like, okay, so we can go back to no.
On guard, like,
Yeah.
are we getting a yes or a no? What's coming next? Okay. All right. So the reason that I wanted you to have that experience is that very simply, let's refer to that as a no brain experience and a yes brain experience. And you felt what the difference is. And IPV and trauma in general, that is a no brain experience. That's heart racing, that's retracting, that's reactionary, that's in trouble, that's fight or flight, fearful, withdraw. Okay, so think of it, the IPV as a no brain experience, and then a yes brain experience as being kind, nurturing, loving, caring, etc. So if we look at typical development of the brain from birth and infancy up into adulthood, the brain develops from the bottom up. Okay? We're born, this is color-coded, so you can see that, you know, with that brainstem, those survival instincts. Then we develop regulation that monitors that. Then we get into the limbic system, social and emotional. And then as we get into teens and older and early adulthood, the brain isn't fully developed until about age 24, 25. Really, we think 18-year-olds know what they're doing. Those of us that have teenagers or kids that old know they don't. Or some of us think back to things we did when we were 18 and think, what was I thinking? So the brain develops from the bottom up in typical development. That's healthy. But with a no brain, a traumatized brain, IPV exposure brain, again, we're developing from the bottom up, but this is where we're focusing. And then there's compromised regulation and social, emotional, and then cognition. I'm going to mention this a few times throughout the next half hour or so. Where attention goes, neurofiring flows, and neurons grow. I'll say that again. Where attention goes, think of where your attention went. We're not saying no or saying yes. Where attention goes, neurofiring flows. That's where the brain's firing neurons. That's where neurons grow. So if you live in a system that's a no-brain system, your attention is going towards survival and safety mechanisms and coping, not to these other factors. So we develop from the bottom up, but we function from the top down. And so there we see how that compromises cognitions or social, emotional, or regulation, and we can be stuck in a hyperarousal state. So we develop from the bottom up, we function from the top down, and remember that where attention goes, neurofiring flows, and neurons grow. It literally shapes the brain. Okay? What builds ACE resilience? We'll just spend a quick minute. Safe environments, secure relationships, and internal skills. I won't spend a lot of time on that. But certainly these are things that we're looking to promote. Safe environments, secure relationships. We said today's about relationships. Relationships is in everything we do. Okay. Did we finish at 2:45? Sorry, 3:45. Yeah. Okay. So let's make the jump away from the effects and some of that brain science to treatment. It's important that we look at evidence-based, developmentally sensitive treatments. Why is developmentally sensitive treatment necessary? Why do you want to take that into account? Do you treat 2-year-olds to 18-year-olds just the same? Why not?
Kids can't abstract.
Kids can't abstract, right? Okay, you got your brain. Think of your wrist as your brain stem. Okay, and then you got your limbic brain. Do that. There's your limbic brain. And then here's your neocortex, prefrontal cortex. There's the human brain, right? We all have that brain stem, that survival brain. Then that limbic brain that comes in with kids and grows, and then we develop the rest of that, and that whole neocortex, prefrontal cortex, the reasoning, the abstract thought, the logic, all those cognitive processing skills, the blue part we saw in the brain and on that slide. Kids developmentally don't necessarily have that. Well, not necessarily, but I can't sit with a 3-year-old and engage them in a cognitive-based conversation. When you ask a 3-year-old, why did you do that? What do they say? I don't know. And then we think they're lying. Right? No, why did you do that? I don't know. They don't know. They didn't think it through about, oh, I'm going to do this because, and that might happen, and I hope I don't get in trouble. They don't do that, right? So we have to take into account developmental level when working with children. Also their verbal capacity. So I can have a 14-year-old, but that's 14 years old chronologically. They might be 9 years old emotionally, or 7 years old emotionally because of the trauma they've experienced. But if I just think, here's a 14-year-old, oh, they should have these capacities and abilities, let's just do some cognitive therapy, probably not going to go very well. I need to consider what's their developmental age emotionally, and treatment-wise, meet them there. Right? Funding sources shouldn't determine treatment for your clients. What's in your client's best interest should determine the treatment for your clients. And that's something we have to educate about and continue to tell people about. So we'll look at a couple treatment modalities. First, we'll look at a more cognitive-based model. Some of you will recognize this as the TF-CBT, the Trauma-Focused Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Model. And this is basically a breakdown. That's an acronym, practice. Some of you have done this training online. Some of you have done the 2-day intensive. Some of you have done the supervision and taken the test and being certified. Some of you have heard about it. So with a latency age child, so 9, 10-ish and older, if they have the cognitive capacities, I'm willing to look at this as a treatment option. It's a cognitive treatment model that focuses on the trauma. As we break that down, that acronym P, the PRAC, the PRAC part, that is about psychoeducation and coping skills. And then the T is the trauma narrative, and then that ICE is treatment consolidation and a closure phase. So the PRAC, the P stands for psychoeducation. We're educating the parent and the child about trauma, what trauma is, how trauma is experienced, how the brain responds to trauma, triggers, responses, to help them understand that what they've experienced is a normal reaction to an abnormal event. Okay, then we get into some skills. This is like the brakes. The PRAC part is like the brakes. We want to make sure they have brakes to stop the car when things start to feel like they're getting out of control emotionally as we get further into treatment, when we get into the trauma, right? So the R is the relaxation. So we are then teaching relaxation skills. Again, using the parent in treatment so that they have that too, giving homework assignments for parents and child to do those things together. It's breathing skills, it's muscle relaxation skills, it's imagery skills. You can find all of this online. Some of you will have the book, the Manarino and Cohen book for TF-CBT that developed the model. A gets into affect modulation, feelings, education about feelings, feelings in general. We do feelings activities, feelings in your body, color my world, feelings thermometers. One that I was introduced to at a conference about incorporating TF-CBT with children was the abacus, and to use this for feelings. And to put a piece of masking tape down the side of the abacus, and then have the child identify a handful of emotions. Most kids will do happy, sad, mad, scared, dull, ad, excited, or lonely, or embarrassed, or, you get 6 or 7 on there. You can write an initial on the masking tape by the color that the child designates for that feeling. And then you can ask the child to scale that feeling. How much do you feel that feeling when this happens? And they can do that. Or as you progress through treatment, they can say, oh yeah, right now I've got that much happy, but this much worry, to use that as a visual, something else to engage them, so it isn't just a cognitive process, but it makes it experiential too. Then we get into C, the cognitive coping. There we're connecting the thoughts and how that affects feelings and behaviors. The cognitive triangle of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, so they can connect those dots and understand how that works. When I have this thought, this is how I feel, this is how it makes me want to act. Then we get into a trauma narrative, which involves really, in a lot of cases, it's a written narrative. That could be something that the child writes. It could be something they ask you to write as they dictate it to you. Some children like to type it. Some children have me type it. But you're going through the traumatic event. And essentially, you're making a book. And I know we're flying through this pretty quickly, but the details and the structure is all there if you look at this model. Really what that goes through is giving the child the opportunity to tell their traumatic experience. Essentially, TF-CBT is a re-exposure therapy in the cognitive model. It's to desensitize the emotional responses they have to the event as they write that narrative. And so as you go through the narrative, you're hitting the senses of what did you see, what did you hear, were there smells, tastes, touches, textures, as much as you can to incorporate the senses and really expand. You typically get a first draft, and then you can read through it, and you can usually take each part and expand it a bit more, expand it, and the child will say, oh, I remember this. Oh wait, this happened next. and then Dad came in, or oh, I heard his keys in the door, and that sound made me feel. And you build this narrative for the purpose of the child then being able to have a safe encounter with the narrative, and to be able to read it and express it, and ultimately share it with a parent or other safe figure in a way that it's now discharged and it doesn't raise any emotions for them. And then we get into some more conjoined parent-child sessions. In vivo exposure, how we're going to handle some triggers and reminders of the trauma when this comes up, and how you'll respond in those situations. Then some more practice skills with the parent and enhancing safety and development, a safety plan moving forward, how to promote safety and encourage safety in the system, so the child knows what to do, how to respond if they're in danger, feeling threatened, etc. That is an evidence-based treatment model. I mentioned evidence-based treatment is important. This is where I give my shout out for play therapy, because as of this year, March, child-centered play therapy, Adlerian play therapy, child-parent relationship therapy, and TheraPlay have been added to the SAMHSA directory of evidence-based treatments. So I mentioned kind of latency age and over. I'm very open to looking at this model and incorporating components of this. Oh, I didn't show you my Mr. Potato Head. This is really nice to help with the trauma narrative. When you do the trauma narrative, sometimes it's very helpful, in fact, I think in most cases, to have the child have an experience doing the narrative with a positive event, just so they can get familiar with writing a narrative. Think of a happy memory, something positive, and write a narrative about that. And then when you take them into doing a narrative about the traumatic event, they know how the narrative goes, and they've had an experience with that. But Mr. Potato Head can be cool because you can put some eyes on them, and you can talk about, what did you see when that was happening? Well, let's put the ears on him, and what did he hear when that was happening? Or what did his feet want to do when that was happening? And help kids, through that process with that. Okay. Come back to that. Let's move on. So, pre-latency age, 8 or 9 years old and younger, and again considering emotional development, that's when I'm most likely to employ a play therapy model. This is a picture of our playrooms. We're going to talk about Ryan and just go through a case study. Ryan is a 6-year-old client. That's not his name. His mother gave me permission and consent to use these pictures. These are not on your slides that you'll get on the website. And please, out of respect, I would ask that you don't take pictures of this. But the slides that we've gone through up until now, you will get copies of. So Ryan came to therapy because his mother thought that he had been sexually abused. She wasn't sure. She had some red flags. But he didn't come to therapy because of IPV. At least that's not why she brought him. So we went in the playroom. Child-centered play therapy allows the child to lead. Everything we talk about from here on out is nothing that I directed him or suggested he do. This is all his own doing as a 6-year-old. Because the drive to heal and the drive to be whole is intuitive. And if given an opportunity and a safe place and the environment to do so, and a witness to that experience and that process, healing will happen. So the first session, Ryan came in the playroom and got the doctor's kit, and within minutes told me that my heart was cracked and he needed to give me a new heart. That's very unusual for a first session. Usually kids will explore, acclimate, take the time to look around, see what this is all about. Who's this guy sitting over here watching me play? He went right to it. Laid me out on the floor, and he gave me open heart surgery and took out my cracked heart and gave me a new heart. I thought symbolically that was very powerful in light of the number one long-term impact of ACE effects of heart stuff. So that's what he did. Session or two later, I asked him to draw a picture. Some of you will guess what that is. Any guesses?
Tortoise.
A what?
Tortoise.
Oh, okay. I need some education on Doctor Who. Okay, this was a house. I asked Ryan to draw a house. It's an assessment procedure. But it didn't look like a house to me. I wouldn't have known it was a house unless I had asked him to draw a house. And developmentally, does that look like what a 6-year-old would draw for a house? Not so much. So there's some regression there. that I would be concerned about emotionally. When I asked Ryan about his house or anything he wanted me to know, he indicated that he and his mother lived in the basement, and there were others that lived up top here. This was very intriguing to me. At the time, somebody in the early presentation suggested stairs. I like that. But it was just very odd. But the thing that caught me was him saying that there was a lot of conflict in this house. So that just put a flag on my radar, put that feather in my cap. And then we went back in the playroom for the next few sessions. Oh, there was a lot of drugs in his house. And at one, I thought, wow, this kind of looks like a syringe too almost. But maybe I'm crazy, because sometimes I come up with crazy stuff. So, but he had witnessed, and his mother confirmed that he had witnessed his father's drug of choice was heroin. He had witnessed his father injecting drug paraphernalia. So I wondered, is there some association very unconsciously, as we look at the stopper of the syringe and the markers, there possibly. But then we went back in the playroom. This is about a third or fourth session, and he said, I got to get my crew. This is my crew. And he lined all these, response vehicles. I keep mixing that up with all these response vehicles, ambulances, police cars, fire engines, and he lined them up in front of the house and then began to play out that there was a bad man in the house with a bomb that was going to go off, and the people in the house needed to get away from the bomb. Now, metaphorically, my soft hypothesis was, a man with a house and a bomb, what does that feel like? Something very explosive. This could go off any time, very unpredictable, very dangerous, not knowing when that's going to happen. And he had to get all the people out the house. Another clinician said, maybe there's a likeness there with this ladder and rescue to those black lines in the house. That there's kind of a ladder effect on that house picture also. But he took all these people that you see piled up in this truck down the ladder and out of the house because there was a man in the house with a bomb. And that's just a different perspective that you can see really what that felt and looked like for him to do that and then drive this vehicle away to safety with all these people in. So at this point now I'm thinking, okay, I've got a house that he's drawn that has a lot of conflict in it. He's talked about that. Now I'm seeing this need for people to get out of a house and be safe because there's a man in the house with a bomb. So I'm thinking maybe there's some domestic violence going on here that I need to ask Mom about because I'm not seeing anything that I would, consider to be trauma related to sexual abuse, but let me just check this out. So I talked with Mom, and I said, I'm seeing these things. These are some soft hypotheses. Can you tell me, give me some context? Was there ever any domestic violence? And she said there was when he was between 2 and 3 years old, and now he's 6 coming to treatment. When he was between 2 and 3 years old, his dad and I had a lot of domestic violence in the home. And then she said, and I just didn't think he remembered any of that or kind of that affected him at all. But lately he's been asking about it. Lately meaning just like the last few weeks. Maybe since he had just drawn the house picture. So this was coming up for him, okay, through some implicit memories that were embedded in him. Bessel van der Kolk, the body keeps the score. This was in Ryan, and he needed to work through this trauma that he had experienced. So for several weeks we did this, that reenactment, getting people out of the house because there's a man with a bomb in the house. Then one session he came in and he got the tool set. And he engaged me in his play and invited me to participate with him and announced that we were going to fix the house. And so he put on the goggles and gave me tools, and he had his tools, and we hammered and we sawed and we fixed and repaired and rebuilt, and we did this for a couple of weeks, and I loved it when he said, "The people in this house are going to freaking love it." Okay, but he rebuilt this house. He was, in my opinion, rebuilding something that for him was not safe and reconstructing it in a way that was suitable and comfortable for him. So we did that for a little while. Then I got a little concerned when in a following session he came in and he completely wrecked the house. You can see, up here, things are really wrecked. And he said to me, as he was doing this and playing this out, "The bad man is back. The bad man remembered where the house is." and he's back at the house, and he did all of this. So I don't know at this point if this is Ryan being afraid that, because I've confirmed with Mom at this point that Dad, well, and I knew from the social history intake, Dad is incarcerated at this time, so he is out of the house. I don't know if this is Ryan's fear about Dad's going to get out of jail and come back to the house, or if this is past history of there were weekends when Dad was maybe in jail and then he came back, or when he left mad and came back angry and there was domestic violence. But he has an experience of coming and going with a threat that does this to the house. That's the effect it has on him. And so we did that for a session. These are just some close-ups to show how he had turned everything upside down in the house and done that. The week after this, he came into session and he got the doctor's kit and he said, I need to check your heart. I need to see if your heart is still okay. And he opened me up and played surgeon and checked my heart. And he said, your heart's okay, it's still good. It's not cracked, which I was relieved to hear. And then we went back to, for a few weeks, rebuilding the house again. But this time he brought the big guns. Well, not the hand tools. Okay, we got the heavy construction equipment to rebuild this house. And then after this, his play really went away from these themes in the house play and all this, and just played very different, new things, very spontaneously, very fun, which to me was an indication that he felt like he had resolved this issue. Now I want to come back to what I said before. Where energy goes, neurofiring flows, neurons grow. Typically when I do a play therapy case presentation, I get some hands that say, but then what did you do to help them get over that? Like, when do you talk about it? Or when do you address it with them? This is the work, you know. Where was Ryan's attention throughout this process? What new scripts was he developing in his mind as he went through all of this play? Okay? There are resources that can help me. We can get out of this dangerous house. The bad man can be gone. The house can be something different than what it's been in the past. I can rebuild it, so to speak, into something safe. The heart can be fixed. The heart can be fixed, and it's still fixed. Larry?
Doing it experientially, which is even more powerful.
Right. To me, this reaches a whole other level than a cognitive treatment model, because the cognitive treatment model gets your mind brain, not your heart brain or your intestinal brain. You know, this hits all levels. And the depth of this work that he did was magnificent, because his energy went towards, I'm not a victim, I can be empowered, we can be safe, we can rebuild, we can heal. The threat is gone. It doesn't control my life anymore, Tom?
Also, when you wreck the house again, the threat can come back, and how do you handle that? I'm still okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the threat can come back, and I can handle it, and I'm still okay. Right? It didn't all go to pot when the threat came back. He found resources. He went to another level, you know, to be able to do that. So, where attention goes, neurofiring flows and neurons grow. Throughout this whole process, Ryan's brain is developing new neural pathways. He's developing more of a yes brain, right? Those are all yes experiences to counteract and undo the no brain experience that he's had. So, this case really was a gift. All work that children do is a gift. They work so hard, and they're so committed to healing and doing the work in wholeness. And it's such an honor to be a part of that. And I hope you felt that as you work with children and their families, because it will change you. And I hope you're open to the change that it can have upon you. Ryan teaches me about bravery and courage and never giving up and trying and not quitting. And the children do that over and over again. So I'm very, very grateful and humbled for that experience. Dr. Roby had reached out to me to present at the conference, and I admit initially I was a little gun shy. In fact, I threw out I'm not sure, IPV is not my specific focus. Yeah, I do some work with it, but it's not like my thing. She's like, kids, trauma, you need to do this. And so I did it. And then I thought, what am I going to do? And about a month later, Ryan came to treatment. And I thought, this is perfect. I need to share this. I'm glad his mother was willing to consent for you to see this, to see his process, to see his healing, and to learn about how this is the counterpart to Dan Siegel's question to Vince Felitti. The ACE study is so depressing, it doesn't do anything good. This is why I do what I do, to be able to experience this. So I thank you all. Looks like we have about 5 minutes left. Maybe there's some questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your attention, for your participation, for getting to know each other. Thank you. Yes.
What do you do if it wasn't in this case, but if the parent is really pushing for you to modify some behavior? So the fact that the play was healing is nice, but I'm sorry, I'm in trouble with did not do this homework or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you do if the parent is pushing to modify some behavior? I try to be very upfront with parents that I'm not a behaviorist. I'm not saying there isn't a place for that. It's just not who I am typically as a clinician. I try not to treat behaviors because I tend to believe that behaviors are symptoms of emotional issues, that they're an outgrowth of something else that's underlying. I've never treated a child for biting other kids at school. Like, okay, but help. I've seen that as a symptom of something else underlying. I don't know if that answers your question, but
I agree with you, but
yeah.
when parents don't.
When parents don't, then sometimes we disagree, and sometimes they go elsewhere. But then I have to check: am I educating the parent enough? Maybe I need to have a parent spend some sessions with me and do some more education with them about this. Because then maybe they're not getting something. They're not understanding the yes/no brain, or the brain develops from the bottom up, but we function from the top down, and things like that. And parents they're fixated on fix this problem, fix my kid, fix my kid. And I'm just very upfront. I can't fix anybody. I will help your child to have an experience in therapy that they can do the work that they need to do. Yeah, Tom.
Did mom ever corroborate or anything about the bad man's back as far as anything else going on in the present moment as far as?
I don't recall that I specifically followed up with her. I don't recall that was a direct question I asked her. I think I put it more in the category of, in his life experience, Dad had come and gone. I don't think it was a fear about Dad's coming back because he's in prison for a while. So I don't think he would be processing the release that's still years ahead. Yeah, again, possibly. But the beautiful thing is I don't have to know. So the question from Tom was, did Mom ever corroborate whether that was about a fear of Dad coming back or if Dad had come and gone in the past? I necessarily don't have to know that. I don't recall asking Mom that specifically because I trust that Ryan knows what that means. He knows what that's about. And I don't have to ask him, what's that about? To understand it. Sometimes I don't understand. There are sessions that I don't know what children have done, but I know that they've been so intense and so focused and worked so hard on something because of the emotional intensity or this theme that repeats itself. And I might go, I got a best guess, but I'm not quite sure what that's about. But I know that the child does.
Can you also repeat which? You mentioned several play therapies that were added to the evidence base.
Oh, so the play therapies that are added to the evidence base, the SAMHSA registry, are the child-centered play therapy, which is, for those of you that know play therapy, that's typically, pretty much Gary Landreth model. Child-centered play therapy, Adlerian play therapy, TheraPlay, and then child-parent relationship therapy, which is different from parent-child interaction therapy. So not that. That may be there, but that's not what I'm talking about. In fact, I think that is there. Child-parent, CPRT, child-parent relationship therapy, which some of you may know as a filial therapy model. That I just think has been tweaked a little and renamed something, but essentially that's filial therapy. So.
Theraplay.
And theraplay. Thank you. That's the fourth one. Theraplay, child-centered Adlerian, and child-parent relationship therapy. Okay? Any more questions? Okay. Thank you.